Hi, I'm Chris, and I want to show you how you can build a Rubberhose style limb inside of Rive. So Rubberhose is one of those GOAT plugins for me when I was using After Effects. It used to be everywhere in all of my pieces. I used to use it all of the time, so massive props to the Battle Axe team for building such an incredible plugin for After Effects. But this is Rive, and we don't have any plugins like that right now. So I'm going to show you how you can build something similar inside of Rive in just a couple of minutes. We're going to build something that's just super versatile, adaptable, and customizable to whatever your needs are as a rigger or character animator inside of Rive. This tutorial will show you how you can build it, and then there's going to be a few different ways of how you can implement it or rig it. You can also skip all of this stuff and just download the resource. The link will be down below somewhere on the Rive marketplace, and just plug it in and go if that's all you want to do. But if you want to follow along the tutorial, let's go, let's open Rive. All right, so inside of Rive, let's create a new file. We're gonna leave everything as it is. Let's create our artboard. Now, we're gonna draw a line. This is eventually gonna become our Rubberhose limb. So I'm just gonna stick to the middle and draw something down. Now, what we want to do is select this shape here, and we're going to get rid of the fill and add a stroke. And let's change the thickness to something like 30 thickness. Obviously, you can customize this stroke however you see fit for your character or whatever it is that you're doing. You could change this to be a gradient, for example. You could add more strokes on top and change like the trim effect. For example, you could have banding, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's completely down to you, however you want to customize this kind of limb and stuff. Now we need to prep our stroke to become a limb. In simple terms, what we're going to use is the Bezier curves and the vertex positions to create a bend in the limb that we're going to be able to control. So if we open up the path and if we return it, we can open up and be able to select our points. Now what we want to be using is the asymmetrical vertex point. So if I select both vertex points, click on this, and then I'm just going to bring those bottom points up and the top point down, so that we've just left with one vertex controller, or sorry, Bezier curve. Now, what I want to make sure is that each one of these is set to 90 degrees, and I'm going to change the length to 60 for each one. This is just what I found works well for me. So again, mine is 90, and here I'm going to change this length to 60. And I'm just going to change this position to be 200. So this limb is now 200 long, essentially. And this just makes it easier to understand what we're doing, and we can just have a bit more control and an understanding, like when we're putting in bones, how far away they need to be and stuff like that. Now, the next step is to actually add the bones. So we need to select the bone tool, which is up here, and quickly draw out a bone from the top. And then I'm pressing V, and I'm going to draw another bone out from the bottom. I want to make sure that they are not parented to each other, they are their own individual bones. And at this point, I want to make sure that the top bone, this one here, I want to make sure that this bone is at the top vertex point and that this bone is at the bottom vertex point. These are going to eventually be our controller points. So I want to make sure here that this top bone is snapped onto that top one, and this bottom one snaps into here, which is our vertex point for the bottom vertex point. And I want to just double check that these ones are rotation is 90, 90. All tiny details like this really make a big difference. Now, I also want to make sure that these are quite small, so I'm going to change their length to be 30, and I'm going to rename them so that I understand what they are. I find that this helps when we're animating to understand what the bones are called. So in this instance, I'm gonna rename this one to be upper bone, and the other one to lower bone. Cool. Now, the first step we want to do is with our path, we want to select the path shape, press return. Now we should be able to bind these bones to the path. If we click on the bind bone button, and if we click on both the upper and the lower bones and press return again, we should see that they get attached to the path shape. Now, if we select both the vertex point and the Bezier curve, we want to make sure that that is associated with our upper bone, so we're going to make that 100%, and that the bottom one is attached to the lower bone 100%. So this means that our lower bone is controlling both these points 100%, and our top bone is controlling these 2 points. Now, what we quickly want to do is just test that this is actually doing what it's saying. So if I select the upper bone and I just rotate, you can see that we are already getting some kind of bend in it. And if I do the same for the lower bone, we are not getting a bend. This is exactly what happens. Sometimes the lower bone. Aha. The issue I had here is I had the wrong part of the Bezier curve sent out. So if I change this one to 60, this to 0, and I'm going to change this back to 90. Okay, and now our lower bone. That's a really good example of just error catching and just making sure that we catch any errors. And we do this by testing it and just checking stuff all the time. Right, now you could quite easily just use these 2 bones, but I love the control that you get with 4 bones and being able to zero down properties to points and stuff. Knowing exactly where origin points are. It also allows you to do like really finicky, tiny moves as like an animator, and do like overshoots as well. I find it easier to understand that positional stuff in my opinion, but you could easily work from these 2 points. So the quickest way to set this up is to basically duplicate these 2 bones, and I'm going to quickly name these lower root and upper root, and I'm going to change both of these to be slightly longer at 60. So there's a differentiation between these 2 bones. Like, what would be nice is that if we could actually color code bones and stuff, but I'm not sure that's actually possible right now. So what I want to do is start thinking about their parental behavior. I want the upper root bone to control the upper bone. So I'm going to drag the upper bone inside, and I want the lower bone to be controlled by the lower root bone. So I'm going to drag that one inside. So we can see here, they're both inside. Now, quickly, we want to test that we're still having the same controls that we had previously. So let's test the lower root zone. We get all the same control. And for upper root, if we change that rotation, we still get that too. And if we separate them, you'll see that we're still attached to the actual upper bone, but we were using this upper bone as another way of controlling stuff. So I like to do this because you can actually do like super fine controls. Like if this was moved over here, you could then end up having the lower bone do some kind of other control bit, but I'm always able to zero out the position, and I'm also able to zero out the rotation as well, just to make sure that it always goes back to a certain point. You could leave this as your control point as well, but we're not done quite just yet. What I like to do is add targets as well, or grouping these upper roots to target controllers, so that I just find the targets much easier to move around inside of Rive. So let's add 2 groups quickly. And in here, G, or you can press G for group. Add 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom. And let's do and rename these. So control upper, control lower. I'm going to change both of these to be targets. You can change them to be whatever you want them to be. Now, there's a quick way that I found of just zeroing these out. So I'm going to drag them into each of the roots controllers, change the positions to be 0, 0. Again here, 0, 0. And then take them back outside of that group and then drag the root bones inside of the controller targets, and you'll find that your roots are now zeroed in on exactly what your control group is set up to be. Okay, let's test that. Make sure this still works. So controlling the upper root, lower root, everything works fine. Now, there is one other thing that we want to do. We want to add another group target. We want to add another group target, change this to a target. And this is going to be our master controller. So what I want to do is change this to be control, and let's say that this is going to be a limb for the second. And now I'm going to put that inside of this one, inside of the controller upper, just zero it out for the second. And then I'm going to put both of these inside of the control limb. And I'm actually going to change this control upper and control lower to be small targets. So we've got our master controller, which is going to be able to drag around the entire limb. And then we've got the uppers, and lower control targets, which can be moved around and change the angles of whatever your limb is meant to be doing. This is the basic setup for the limb controller. You can put both controllers inside it, or you can have your lower one outside of this. And if you move your other one around, you'll see that the bottom one stays where it is. Like, it's a super versatile and agile way of setting and rigging up characters. Like, it's completely up to you how you want to have your limbs set up and stuff. But for now, let's leave the upper and lower inside of the control limb. So the only other thing we want to add is a way of controlling how much curve we have, or sorry, how much curvature we have in the limb, whether we want it to be more angular or curved. As with most things, there are probably a ton of different ways about going about this. So I'm going to show you 2. One is to data bind it, and the other is to use joysticks to control the curvature and stuff. So let's create these 2 versions. Let's duplicate this artboard, and we're going to do the first one. Let's call this Rubberhose data bind, and let's name this second one Rubberhose joystick. Okay. In the data binder version, what we need to do is add a view model. So let's create a view model. Oh, or do we already get one? We already get one. Let's call this view model Rubberhose. And let's add a number property. And this is going to be our limb curvature. Okay, and for now, let's leave this at 0. Now, the way we're going to do this is back in the hierarchy, in the path. If we open it up, if you select the Bezier curves, you notice that we have this here, which is our position of the Bezier handle curve. And if you change this, it goes further away or closer to the vertex point. This is how we're going to change the angle on the limb, the curvature. So if we right click and data bind this to our limb curvature, for both this at the upper curve, Bezier curve, and the lower one, we're going to data bind both to the limb curvature points. And in the artboard, I'm just gonna, so we've already attached the data binding view model. Just attach that if it isn't there already. And in the data bind, in the limb curvature, change this to 60. And if you swip over to animate mode and you run this, nothing changes. Let's just go inside here, inside our timeline. And I'm just quickly gonna change this so we can see it in action. So I'm gonna just change our lower and upper rotation. And then in the state machine, if I run that, so we've got a curve. And if we go to the data binding and change the curvature, you'll see that it becomes tighter angled the higher the number goes, until it goes into some incredibly over the top number stuff, curvatures. And the lower it goes, the less curve we have, because the Bezier curves are like right down at the top and the bottom and stuff. So our default is 60, and the higher you go, the more angular you get. I'm just going to change that to 60. So that is one way of doing stuff. I'm not sure how appropriate it is to use data binding to do this as a rigger and an animator. I don't know, like I'm not sure I would use it and set it up quite like this, because it just doesn't feel like you've got any control when you're animating stuff or when you're setting stuff up. But I thought I should show you anyway. And the second method is to use joysticks to control this and enable you to change the curvature in that way via a joystick control, which as a rigger and animator, like, it seems like a way more natural approach. So let's use a joystick to enable the control of the curvature. This is probably it's probably closer to how we had it in After Effects as well, with like being able to control some of those information. So in our animation, let's create, in our artboard. So in our Rubberhose joystick artboard, let's go to animate mode. Let's create, in our timeline, let's change this to curvature. And we're gonna just leave this as 1 second. And let's go into our hierarchy, into our paths. We're gonna do exactly the same sort of thing, but we're gonna manually edit the paths and add keyframes to it, and then associate this animation and apply that to a joystick control so we can manually change the Bezier curve distances. So if we go into the path and press return to bring up our points, so we can stick a keyframe on the top one at 60 and the bottom one at 60. Now, if you go down into your drop downs, you'll notice that we have, for vertex 1 and vertex 2, we've got these 2 keyframes. I'm going to drag these ones into the middle point at 30 because this is basically our default curvature that I want to keep. So what I want to do now is add keyframes at the front and the top, and these are going to be the different extremes that we can go through. So at one end, I want to put something low, so I'm going to change these to be, I can open them up so I can edit them manually as well. So at one side, let's change it to be 20. I don't think having 0 is a particularly good look on this limb. And then at the other side, let's go on a rather higher number, so 150, for example. Okay, now in our artboard, let's create a joystick. If I remember where, here. Okay, so let's create the joystick. And you could put it on whatever axis you want, however you want to kind of control stuff. But basically we want to add curvature. We want to apply that animation which we labeled curvature on that controller point. So when we change our joystick, we're actually changing how much curvature we're applying to our limb, essentially. So to showcase that, we need to go into the timeline. Let's create just a new timeline for the second just to showcase it. Change the control upper, change the lower, and now if we change the joystick, so in this instance, down is to get more angled, but we could easily invert that. So down on this instance, like down is less angled, and medium is our default angle, and high is our high angle. And obviously we can go back into the curvature and change this. So in this instance, if we want the highs to be something more extreme, we could change that to be more like 250 or 250. And then if we go into our timeline, we see that this angle is now changed, and we've got even more control as to how much angle or angled move kind of points there are in this bend. And that's pretty much it, except to say that you can completely change your parenting order of bones, add more controls. Like you could easily add wrist or hip controllers, duplicate the limbs, do whatever you want. Although if you do duplicate the limb with the joysticks, you do need to remember to add the vertex points, the same kind of controls in here, if you are duplicating the limbs and stuff. I'm sure there's probably multiple ways of doing this whole rig. Like I always say to other students that there is no one right way to do anything. This is just the way that I found works for me personally, and I love the control and versatility that it gives me. If you follow along the tutorial and you do end up making something cool, like I'd love to see it, like tag me at Yellow Studio, like I'm on all the different socials and stuff. Yeah, enjoy. I'd love to see what you make. Bye.